Is your source of spiritual food working for you? Your source and quality of spiritual food is at least as important to your welfare as the source and quality of the food you take into your body. Aloha. My name is Lona Ho'ala, and I'm here with my wife, Lonnie. In this presentation, we're going to cover what spiritual food is, why it is so important for you to incorporate it into your daily life, and we're also going to share what's on the menu here at the spiritual buffet we call our Eagle's Nest family, and how you can get access to this excellent quality of spiritual food. So let's begin with the idea that corruption is everywhere. That's what happens when people are spiritually starving. Unless you've been living under a rock for the last few years, you already know that corruption is evident at levels never before seen in America, at least in my lifetime. I'm 75 years old as this is written, and when I look around at the world, I'm deeply troubled at the world that my grandchildren might have to inherit. Every day the news is full of shocking stories of corruption that take place in government, in our media, in our schools, in our medical system, in our foreign policy, in our banking system, our biggest businesses, and more. Drug and alcohol abuse is rampant. Our elections are determined by bribes from billionaires and their lobbyists well before we ever get a chance to vote. Children and women are sold into sex slavery run by drug cartels, and that's become a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. That's tragic. Communist-style censorship is alive and well in our legacy and social media outlets. Government routinely ignores our right to privacy. And it's obvious our world is spiritually sick. We can blame the corruption on the part of our politicians and business leaders all we want. But if we really want to know where the problem starts, we need to look in a mirror. Every instance of corruption is evidence of a deeper and less obvious level of moral decay on the part of our citizenry. Behaviors that were once considered intolerable are now accepted as normal. And that's all evidence of the kind of spiritual weakness that's inevitable when our sources of spiritual food are either nutritionally poor or, worse yet, actually toxic.
None of this would be happening if our population had not been lulled into the acceptance of immorality as synonymous with being progressive. Behaviors like shoplifting, attacking police, and burning down buildings in the name of some socially popular cause are now somehow more desirable than the proven value of conservative principles that call for mutual respect of one another's sacred space, courteous dialogue in our communications, and equal protection under ethical laws as the bedrock of moral behavior.
All of this will come to an end. You can count on it. And that's because moral rot produces weakness. And that weakness attracts predators, just as surely as a wounded deer attracts wolves. Mm-hmm. Unless we wake up, before long, most Americans will be living under a worldwide tyranny that will remind us of why not tolerating immoral behavior is so important. Freedom requires responsibility, and has happened repeatedly throughout human history. Only when societies lose their freedoms do their citizens start to realize that they have responsibilities that cannot be ignored without peril. We have the power to stop our enslavement right up to the point we give it away. And how do we do that? Well, by buying into the idea that we don't have to work for what we want. We're told by the billionaire elite that all we have to do is just give our power away to big government and big business, and they'll take care of us. If we simply vote for those who promise us a living wage, rent subsidies, and free health care, everything we need will be within easy reach. Even a quick glance through human history will reveal how poorly that works out for societies that try it. We need spiritual support in the form of values that produce spiritual sovereignty, or we're going to become enslaved.
Social problems become our personal problems. Our society is fractured. Politics has polarized our citizenry to the point where people actually hate each other, only because of how they identify in their political leanings. Respectful dialogue is far too rare. This is dangerous because when dialogue fails, violence takes place. Personally, are you truly happy, or do you suffer from a nagging sense that there must be more to life? What about your spouse? Is he or she thriving? What about your children? Are they learning appropriate moral perspectives in school, or are they being propagandized to believe that giving in to their feelings is the key to their well-being? Are they being taught that poor performance is acceptable when they are easily capable of excellence? Are they using drugs or alcohol? Do you even know who their friends are? What source of spiritual food are you providing them? If you feel like your life is missing something, you have a lot of company. How many people out there are turning to drugs and alcohol to ease their spiritual pain? Is more money or social acceptance the answer? If that is the answer, then why are so many celebrities, social people, media influencers, and people from well-to-do communities committing suicide?
What is spiritual health, and why is it so important? Well, everything in our world is composed of a spiritual as well as a physical nature. Much like how an architect must design a building by translating ideas held in mind, that's spiritual things, to paper before it can be built, that's a physical thing. Spirit's the blueprint for the form. Now, an architect can't just put anything that comes to mind as a part of the blueprint and expect it to work. There are engineering principles that must be taken into consideration, and these principles range from things like understanding gravity to the capacities of materials to cope with the stresses that will be produced by the environment. Now, these principles are often called natural laws. They're spiritual in that principles are not things that can be weighed or measured objectively. However, they can be known by their effects. That's how we know about spirit, is through its effects. We can know when we have a correct understanding of one of these principles when we design something and it works. When we don't understand the principle well enough, chances are it won't work, or if it does, it won't work well. Principles and the understanding required to apply them are spiritual things. Now, understanding is a dimension of spirit we call consciousness. It's the place that can intuit meaning and make choices that impact the life of all beings, whether they be human, animal, insect, or even a microorganism or a plant. They all have consciousness because they all make choices, and even if we don't relate to the consciousness that drives them to make such choices, they're conscious.
What is spiritual food? 3 things determine the quality of your spiritual food. Number 1, understanding. Number 2, feelings. And number 3, alignment with reality. Understanding unlocks a spectrum of choices, but understanding must be in harmony with reality for it to be a reliable guide to making choices. You can't make a choice that works unless you understand the issue. Feelings are the motivation behind those choices. Feelings must be informed by understanding before choices can promote a flow of life energy. Acting out without understanding doesn't work. There are many sources of spiritual food, but the quality of that food will always revolve around those 3 requirements. Listening to a sermon on Sunday or reading some holy book like the Bible most certainly qualify as spiritual food. The problem comes when understanding is limited because the recipient is acting like a programmed robot to believe stories literally when they work far better as metaphors. Does God have a favorite race like the Jews, or is the story meant to teach the obvious truth that all people who honor one another as divine aspects of the one God, the all that is, are God's chosen people? The difference is important because the first leads to unending vicious wars in the Middle East, the other leads to peace. But religious texts and preachings are far from the only source. When you read any book, watch any movie or TV program, listen to a speaker, or even listen to a song, you're consuming and using spiritual food that can vary a lot in terms of quality. Like all foods, spiritual food can be toxic, nutritionally empty, or nourishing. The difference is that physical food affects your body, spiritual food affects your soul. Toxic spiritual food creates fear, arrogance, sarcasm, disrespect, ridicule, narcissism, and a victim mentality that justifies unloving behavior. It weakens your spirit, destroys a sense of peace, diminishes your ability to recognize evil, and makes you vulnerable to sources of inappropriate ideas that can harm you. Empty spiritual foods are not toxic in themselves. They are simply ideas, attitudes, and behaviors that help you pass the time, well, without having to really think about anything. Nourishing spiritual food results in peace, joy, and the ability to enjoy the life energy that flows when we live with love. To live with love, we must first understand what love is. To understand what love is, we must first become aware of the purpose of life and how the universe operates. Only then can we make the life-giving choices that can align our behavior with that love.
So what are some sources of nourishing spiritual food? When most people think of an obvious source of nourishing spiritual food, they think of religions, and that's because religions have been the main source of such ideas and perspectives for thousands of years. The problem with religions is that while they may provide nourishing spiritual ideas, those ideas are too often commingled with attitudes of arrogance and intolerance, liberally combined with beliefs that don't connect with modern educated people. Usually these attitudes become manifest when people are told they need to take the dogma promoted by such religions as literally true. For a deeper understanding of dogma, listen to my podcast, Dogma versus Reality, parts 1, 2, and 3. There'll be links to those in the description of this video below. Now, if you have problems with ideas that Jesus died for our sins so we can be saved, or if you find the idea that Jesus was born of a virgin or resurrected after death as implausible, many of these religions will immediately cast you as a person unworthy of eternal life in the kingdom of heaven. Your mind has been captured by Satan. You'll be mocked, shunned, or otherwise judged by other members of that religion. And that's the reason Christianity is hemorrhaging members. Not all Christians are like that, but too many are. And people who identify as spiritual but not religious, the acronym for that is SBNR, are exploding. Surveys indicate that the number of people identifying as religiously unaffiliated is the fastest growing group in the U.S. Labeled as nuns, and we could spell that N-O-N-E-S, like nun, as opposed to the nun in the Catholic religion. If those people were classified as a religion, they'd be by far the fastest growing religion in the country. Now, religions that want to remain relevant would be well advised to look into that mirror. If the purpose of a religion is to provide a quality source of nutritious spiritual food capable of keeping a population spiritually healthy, why are they failing so badly? Now, maybe the answer isn't Satan doing war with God in the latter days. That's just an excuse. Could it be that people are far more informed than in earlier times, so it's increasingly more difficult to get educated people who are discovering how to think for themselves to subscribe to irrational dogma? Now, increasing numbers of people find their spiritual food by studying philosophies that are expressions of spiritual wisdom. That's just like Huna wisdom, but just without all the dogma. Such people may or may not subscribe to a religion, but their primary goal is to find a spiritual understanding without the noise of dogma. Now, if you're a person who might see yourself in the category of a nun, and especially if you're a person searching for a quality source of spiritual food, our Eagle's Nest family offers a buffet of options that may fit your needs perfectly.
What is the Eagle's Nest family? The Eagle's Nest family supports a family of people interested in unlocking the kind of spiritual wisdom that results in hope and the freedom from fear that comes from the ability to discover and identify with the Christ light within all things. This Christ light, also known as enlightenment or the light of consciousness, is a spiritual capacity the ancient Hawaiians personified with the term Aumakua, which means heavenly parent. To discover this Christ light within, we apply the principles mastered by these ancient groups of Hawaiians called the mo'o. They use these universal principles we call Huna wisdom to create the most enlightened society that has ever existed on earth. For as many as 2,000 years, there were no kings, no armies, no war, and very little crime. This time of peace resulted in abundance for everyone in this society. No one had to do without adequate food, shelter, water, clothing, or medical treatment. Collectively, this wisdom is known today as Huna wisdom. As you start to take advantage of this wisdom, it will become increasingly evident that Huna wisdom is the only philosophy big enough to bring our world back from the precipice of annihilation that humanity in its unconsciousness has brought us to. This is a big claim, and the only way for you to verify it is to experience it yourself. Our Eagle's Nest family is the membership arm of the Hualo Huna Foundation, also known as Huna Wisdom Foundation, which is a 501c3 tax-exempt church, so all donations are completely tax deductible.
Now, why you may want to consider making myself and my wife Lonnie your pastors and the Eagle's Nest family your church. As you look around for a healthy source of spiritual food, there are 4 reasons to make us your pastors. Number 1, I have died twice. I've been there. My wife, Lonnie, was present and completely involved with both of those experiences. Because of what I experienced during those times that I died, I understand what's in the spirit world, our place in it, and why we're here. In those death experiences, I met the true Christ, and I discovered that Christ is not a man who lived 2,000 years ago that we call Jesus, or Yeshua as he was known in those days. Instead, I came to know Jesus as a master teacher priest. This true Christ is a spirit that lives in every person. It's our connection to the all that is God. The true Christ is personally involved in our lives to the extent we invite it to participate in our lives with an attitude of humility and the intention of providing loving service to the rest of the circle of life. Now, during his life, Jesus was referred to as rabbi, a Jewish term meaning teacher, priest. His teachings revealed that his consciousness was very much in harmony with his inner Christ. As a result, like all spiritual teachers throughout history, he was able to teach others how to access their own inner Christ. He was a master at it. Now, historically, was there really a man called Jesus behind the establishment of Christianity? Did a Jesus really walk the earth as a man? I've studied that extensively since I left the Benedictine monastery in my youth. Now, while there are many doubters, there has been enough uncovered archaeologically to convince me that such a man did exist. Evidence exists to show he was an ordinary man, a Jewish rabbi, who was married, and he had children. This man incurred the wrath of both the Romans and the Jewish Pharisees for daring to teach that all people are made out of God and therefore share a divine heritage. As far as the Romans were concerned, only the emperor was divine. To the Pharisees, the idea was total blasphemy. This Jesus was likely crucified for teaching these things. He died, and as was the custom in his day, his body was placed in a temporary tomb. Sometime later, his body was removed from that tomb and left to decompose. Ultimately, his bones were placed in a stone box called an ossuary, and that ossuary, along with others of his family, were then placed in a family tomb that was recently discovered in Jerusalem. That was a monumental discovery that will rock history, but has been kept quiet because of its potential impact on not only Christianity, but Jewish faith as well. Now, all the rest can be attributed to a Roman man named Paul, who created the myth based on more ancient myths about a god-man called Mithras. This version was adopted by the Roman Emperor Constantine and became the foundation of modern Christianity. Early texts, once accepted by the actual followers of Jesus, were destroyed because they didn't agree with Paul's narrative. But some copies have emerged from the dustbin of history, and the stories they tell of Jesus, his life, and his teachings are extraordinary. Now, for those interested in exploring this archaeology, we'll have other presentations on the subject featuring experts from Jewish, Christian, and other archaeological sources. But what we can surmise from these ancient documents is that what Jesus actually taught was that Christ is not a man, but rather a spiritual capacity that is a part of every one of us. This inner Christ lives in complete awareness of and is totally connected to the all that is God. Learning how to live in harmony with this inner Christ is the purpose of this dream we call our life. True priests don't see themselves as helping people more than they already are, or needing to do anything to be saved after death. Instead, they see their job as awakening people to the miraculous nature of who they already are, and realize that no one ever gets lost. We all return to our home, where our real divine self resides for eternity. Now, no matter the time or culture within which they operate, true priests are incredibly courageous, because history reveals that teaching people how to love and respect one another is a very dangerous job. From my death experiences, here's what I can know for sure. I realize that ordinations do not make people priests. Priesthood is a behavior, not a title. Many priests are simply parents, teachers, or people respected for their wisdom. They're the true examples of the kind of priesthood embodied by Jesus. Whomever they were or are today, they respect our honor, respect, gratitude, and support. Most importantly, I came to understand that the real Christ is very personal. It's an inseparable dimension of ourselves, and that's why none of us get lost, no matter how ugly anyone's life looks in any given time. I also discovered that God doesn't send anyone to a fictional place in the spirit world called hell. Instead, hell is a place of our own creation, right here in this world, when we make unloving choices. Now, true salvation from the hell realms we create happens when we accept the light and love that comes from our inner Christ. That's because the Christ light is the light of consciousness, or enlightenment, that allows us to see loving choices that allow us to live in harmony with the divine plan out of which reality is forged. And finally, I learned that life is a game called Let's Wake Up. And that's why God allows so much pain to exist. Pain is a perfect part of this game because it's the pain of unconsciousness that motivates us to seek higher ways of looking at our world. And it's only from these elevated perspectives, what the Hawaiians call Ike Papalua, or the Native Americans call eagle vision, that we can see the kinds of choices that put us in harmony with reality, or God. And reality and God are just two different words for the exact same thing. Christ is that dimension in each of us that informs of these choices when we're ready to accept them. That voice, being an indivisible part of us, is always available when we humbly ask for its guidance.
My husband and I are not new to this. We have counseled thousands of people over 4 decades. We've seen unconsciousness in all of its dimensions, from murder, suicide, child abuse, spousal abuse, infidelity, racism, and every other kind of ism, as well as the violation of public trust by those we elect to political office, those in the media, those who refuse to expose it, or those who misrepresent dangerous products to make a buck. We don't make anyone bad or wrong for their unconscious behaviors and choices. Instead, we are committed to helping people use the pain they find in their self-created hell realms to find the deeper dimensions of their nature, where the light and life of their inner Christ lives. We also allow people who are not humble to endure the painful consequences of their arrogant choices, because we know as priests that pain is our ally. Only when people have enough pain are they willing to look for the kinds of choices that will allow them to escape from the spiritual prisons they created for themselves. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Finally, we are not missionaries. We are old enough to realize that if God is the all that is, that every religion is also a part of God, and that every religion is perfect for any person who feels obligated or committed to walk its path. We accept that there is no way we can know what is spiritually best for another. That is the job of their own inner Christ. So we have no need to make anyone bad or wrong for their spiritual choices.
Now, it's important to realize I'm a scientist, and my job is to discover and teach truth or reality and live in harmony with it. I have no interest in trying to convince anyone of anything, because I've come to the understanding that the credential is always in the message, never in the messenger. When people have the requisite humility born of pain, they can recognize truth. They don't have to be convinced to believe it. Beliefs are poor substitutes for a true understanding of reality. And another reason to make us your pastors is that we're kahuna priests. We teach a holistic system of reality-based wisdom that addresses 4 interrelated aspects of health: personal spiritual growth, health, nutrition, and wellness, healthy relationships and family, and enlightened social values.
We are creating a family or church to support people who want a source of nutritional spiritual food that can help their family members and themselves become more awake tomorrow than they are today, every day for the rest of their lives. This includes a stream of video podcasts on a variety of fascinating spiritual subjects, a series of classes we call The Way of Wisdom, Tuesday night member meetings where you can ask questions or offer your opinions, an ability to host your own page on our community website, and for tithe payers, the opportunity to join our personal priesthood program. This is a priceless opportunity where you can find out for yourself why this is such an important way of supporting the spiritual growth of not only yourself but also your children. Please give serious consideration to joining our family. None of us do as well alone as when we stand together and remind one another of our divine heritage. God knows that this is the only message big enough to heal our world. We have 3 levels of membership to fit any person's desire and budget. To explore our membership options, go to our website at www.hunawisdom.com. There's a link in the video description below. Aloha.
Aloha.